we're going to move on now to Injustice Rising with Science Saturday, to what for me personally is one of the highlights of this entire conference. Yes, we have none other than David Ray Griffin with us today. And I'm not kidding you. You're going to actually see his face. It's been so long. We have and other guests too, but let me bring you the presence of David Ray Griffin himself. There he is, almost present in the flesh. David Ray Griffin is an emeritus professor of philosophy of religion and theology at Claremont School of Theology and Claremont Graduate University. He's published more than 36 books, mostly in the philosophy and science religion, but 14 of these deal specifically with 9/11, including his first book on the subject, The New Pearl Harbor, Disturbing Questions About the Bush Administration and 9/11, published in 2004. He started way before I did. In 2011, he co-founded the 9/11 Consensus Panel, which I hope he'll talk about tonight as well. Now, David Ray Griffin was the one that I heard on the radio when I was on my way back from a construction observation meeting on March 29th in 2006, listening to Bonnie Faulkner's radio Guns and Butter here in the San Francisco Bay Area. David Ray Griffin was talking about the oral histories of the first responders, 118 witnesses of explosions in the towers, seeing flashes of light as documented by Professor Graham McQueen, whom he was drawing from in his research that day. I was so stunned that I had to pull over in my van in a parking lot and just sit there and listen. I couldn't believe my ears. I said, I'm an architect. I would have heard about this, right? I mean, I would have heard if there was a third tower that came down on 9/11. The AIA hasn't issued one bulletin to any of its 90,000 members on the third worst structural failure in modern history after the Twin Towers. So we're going to bring him on, but first let me introduce you also to Stephen Jones, PhD. He's a former professor of physics at Brigham Young University. He conducted his PhD research at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center and postdoctorate research at Cornell University and the Los Alamos Mason Physics Facility. Jones was the initiator of research of the peer-reviewed paper, Active Thermitic Materials Observed in the Dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe, published in the Open Chemical Physics Journal. He's also the author of the influential paper, which turned my head around as well. Why indeed did the World Trade Center buildings collapse? Because it was Stephen Jones who alerted us to the contents of the dust, finding molten iron microspheres, previously molten iron, which was then corroborated by the U.S. Geological Survey. All of its dust studies find these strange, small, almost naked to the human eye, molten iron microspheres everywhere. 6% of some of these dust samples, but they're in all the dust samples. They're up to 4 tons of these molten iron microspheres. Now, I'm going to go on and introduce also one of our other heroes, one of the other pioneers in the 9/11 truth movement, Mr. Niels Harrit, PhD, served as an associate professor of chemistry at the University of Copenhagen from 1971 to 2009 until his retirement. He's the author of more than 60 published peer-reviewed papers. Since 2007, he's been actively involved in the global movement for 9/11 truth and is the lead author of a scientific paper published in April of 2009 describing the findings of active thermitic material in the World Trade Center dust from the collapses of these 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers. Niels has lectured extensively all over the world on the World Trade Center evidence. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me incredible pleasure to introduce you to our three esteemed guests. Here's Stephen Jones, and here is David Ray Griffin, and here is Mr. Niels Harrit. Gentlemen, how are we all?
Good, thanks. That's good to
Never
see you
before
Great, Stephen, right?
have we been on one
Fantastic.
platform.
Pardon?
I mean, this is just awesome. I have chills all over my body. You guys built the 9/11 truth movement with so many others, but you are the key pioneers that have given us the evidence, the research that gave so much credibility. Say something and tell us why you came back and are here to share with us. And then I'll turn it over to you one at a time after that.
David?
What did I say, David? David, you should start.
Nominated.
I got offline, so what do you want from me?
I'd like you to share with us why you're here right now, just for a minute.
Wow.
And then we'll hear from each of the others, and then we'll go back to you for an extended talk here.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to see Niels and Stephen, those you, Richard. And I'm here because you asked me to come. And so I think it's a very, well, obviously, if I written so many books about it, I think it's a very important issue. And I think this method of dealing with it is a very helpful one, especially given the pandemic, that we can't come together physically. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, awesome that you're here. I'm telling you, I'm just speechless. Stephen, let's jump to you next. Why are you here? Other than the fact that I cajoled you, I twisted your arm. We're so delighted to hear from you guys. Talk to us.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here. It's great to see Niels and David again, and you too, Richard. I will be talking a little bit. I have been active as what I can do in research, and in particular with regard to 9/11. I'll talk about that a little bit. So I'm glad to be back on the air with you under these strange circumstances. Which circumstances remind us of 9/11, the big lie of 9/11. Some of us are starting to detect there's something fishy, there's something very rotten in Denmark, you would say, Niels, and as we look at this reaction to this virus. I mean, I'm not questioning the reality of virus, but I'm questioning the lockdowns and all that going on.
Right
so
on.
Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit if we have time too. The parallels between 9/11 and COVID-19 lockdowns reaction.
Okay. Yeah, some have called it another 9/11. Niels, I forgot to mention to our esteemed audience here who we've brought in you here today, right now. Niels Harrit is primarily responsible for this paper, as I mentioned, but what they found in this paper, people, because Niels isn't here to talk about the paper, so I want you to know that they found up to 4 tons by extrapolation, the red-gray chips with red on one side, gray on the other. The red side has been proven by chemical analysis to be primarily composed of thermite, iron oxide, and aluminum powder. What is that doing in these chips, which we thought were paint, but no, they're attracted by a magnet. This is not paint. When put in a heater, a differential scanning calorimeter, you guys found that they ignite, producing what? The molten iron microspheres that Dr. Stephen Jones had documented earlier, which is obviously and only could be the evidence of thermite incendiaries, because thermite issues molten iron at 4,000 degree temperatures, which the jet fuel, of course, in office fires can possibly account for. So these chips are clearly a self-corroborating, repeatable set of experimentally reproducible evidence that could put a lot of people away if we can only get a court system to respond to it. And yes, we have submitted all of your guys' evidence in these forms to a petition in a grand jury for a grand jury investigation, in our FBI lawsuit, in our request for correction to NIST, and we will be submitting it next month to the UK in the court system there to get this new Jeff Campbell justice campaign going and into the court system and approved by the Attorney General there for the new inquest into his brother's death. Because all this evidence, especially what you, Stephen, and Niels have done here, we've waited a long time. That paper was produced in 2009. Stephen's work earlier than that with the iron microspheres. And these are the shoulders, you guys, that we're standing on right now. We're witnessing. And so, Niels, just a couple of comments from you, and then we'll jump into David Ray Griffin.
Me as well. I'm deeply honored and, of course, accepted this invitation without any hesitation. And I'm very happy and very glad to see old friends on the same screen, even though we cannot be at the same place and time. And it has been a long time, and so it's really a peak also in my personal life to be here with all three of you. But David and Steve both preceded me in time. I got on board in 2006. I'll be happy to make a more detailed account of how I actually woke up to reality. But and I hope we'll eventually return to the nanoscience, thermite later on, and because I believe I have a coherent collapse scenario for the Twin Towers, which I can do very shortly. Oh. And I also acknowledge that we are in serious times, and we are at a point where science is breaking down. I'm sure both my academic colleagues may agree on that. We are past evidence. And in some ways, we have been bombed back to ages before Galileo, and we are simply ignoring evidence. And 9/11, of course, is a prime example of that. So still, in my opinion, 9/11 is key because everyone can count to three. Okay, there were 2 airliners and 3 high-rises. It's as simple as that. So 9/11 is key still, even though many things are getting more complicated these days. But I'll be happy to return to the more technical issues later.
Oh, wonderful. Let's jump right in then to David Ray Griffin. David, you have the floor, and we're standing by with you.
Okay, I'm just going to respond to the list of questions I was given. The first was, what alerted you to the 9/11 problem? Well, there was a student at my school, the Claremont School of Theology, who came to me one day and said, there's a visiting scholar here who said 9/11 is an inside job. I believe the scholar was from England. And she said, ask if I wanted to talk to him. And I said, of course. So I talked to him and then started asking for evidence. I didn't find it convincing. But then I was told by 2 other colleagues and about other types of evidence, other websites, especially Paul Thompson's timeline, 9/11 timeline. And I was told about this by Fred Burks, who had quite an interesting life himself. And the next question was, what inspired you to get involved? So I had been asked by students to give a talk about Iraq. The war in Iraq had just started. And so I did, and I gave the talk about 9/11 as being the pretense for the attack on Iraq. And so for my lecture, I used, of course, the timeline and then some really good books that had been published already. Gore Vidal, Nafiz Ahmed, and I'm sorry, I lost my place here. Oh, and Michel Chossudovsky. So I used those books primarily in the New Pearl Harbor. And so another question was, I've sort of added this question myself because I'm here on a science day and I'm not a scientist. And so a question that has come to me often is, has being a theologian helped or hurt? And in many respects, it has actually helped. I had got my book became well known because of a review by Catholic theologian Rosemary Ruther. And then the next question was, how did New Pearl Harbor get published? Well, it took quite a lot of work. I sent it to many publishers, and there were no takers. One publisher called Common Courage said, just gave a three-word answer, not for us. And at least they didn't call themselves Uncommon Courage. So then I contacted a left-wing British publisher, and the one person I talked to was very excited about it. He wanted to get to know me and that, but then it turned out that the project was killed upstairs. But he made a good suggestion. He said, well, you should call your book the new Reichstag. And but I said, Americans don't know about the Reichstag. But I said, they do know about the Pearl Harbor attacks. And so that's how the title got started. My friend Richard Falk, and I talked to him about finding a publisher. And he had published with many publishers, and he recommended my book to many of them, but none of them responded, even to Richard Falk. And then he mentioned that he had just published a book by Olive Press, or Interlink is the other name for it, and he had worked with an editor named Pam Thompson, and so I learned later that she responded about Richard's suggestion by saying, Richard says on his website that Griffin is sensible, but he's a conspiracy theory. So she didn't know what to do, and she asked her father, who happened to be a Presbyterian minister, and he said, David Ray Griffin, I've read all of his books. So that's how the New Pearl Harbor got published. I've been also asked, which of your books do you recommend the most? I would say my first really good book on this was the 9/11 Commission Report, Omissions and Distortions. And then there was the New Pearl Harbor Revisited, which was much superior to the original New Pearl Harbor. I also published a book called Debunking 9/11 Debunking. And it turned out to be one of my favorites because publisher at Interlink said, I don't think I can sell a book with a title like that. It turned out that Debunking 9/11 Debunking was my favorite, was the public's most favorite book of mine after The New Pearl Harbor. So I got to say, I told you so.
Pretty awesome. By the way, David, do you mind if I give away one of your other books, which is a favorite of mine, 9/11 and American Empire? Intellectuals.
Oh yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about it.
Okay, well, when you do, okay. Not yet, everybody. I gave it away, didn't I, David? Okay. Go ahead. Send me info at 1811.
Called Bush and Cheney: How They Destroyed America and the America and the world. And I talked about a lot of things. The last part of the book talked about 9/11 and all the evidence. But the first parts of the book talked about related areas. And one of them was a chapter on Islamophobia. So for our interest today, that was particularly important. Finally, there's 9/11 Unmasked, which I edited with Elizabeth Woodworth, and it's popular because, with me at least, because a publisher, a writer named Philip Rodas wrote for the Off Guardian 17 years on what really happened on 9/11. So Rodas had written really negative things about 9/11 and had called it really bad names and as really as nonsense. And but he was willing to write a review for Off Guardian, and he ended up saying, "This is as strong a prima facie evidence for throwing out NIST as ever contributed to an official cover-up. I'll close with the recommendation to all who have been, as I had been, that had held the view that the 9/11 truther case was too silly for serious consideration. I was wrong. Buy the book." Then I was asked what were some high points of my dealing with 9/11. I've already mentioned the great review by Griffin. I was invited to give a lecture at the University of Wisconsin.
About a minute.
Yeah, David, something happened to your microphone there.
I know nothing about this stuff, so I have no idea.
Okay, there you go. You sound good now.
Back? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't make my font large enough, so I have to lean forward to see my notes. And anyway, gave this lecture at the University of Wisconsin. C-SPAN came to record it, and this lecture introduced serious 9/11 studies.
Okay, we just lost you again. You're coming and going. Can we take the microphone off of? Oh, is it up on your body? Is that where it is?
No, it's I've got my wife's phone, computer, and
okay, let's find now. Keep going.
okay.
Yeah, it comes and goes, unfortunately.
Okay, sorry. I'll try not to move. And,
maybe that's.
So this was in 2005 that C-SPAN published this lecture. This lecture then turned into the book that you mentioned, Stephen, 9/11 and the American Empire, Intellectuals Speak Out, which I co-edited with Peter Dale Scott. And so through the lecture, through the C-SPAN and then this book, we got several intellectuals interested in 9/11 who had not been interested in it before. This led to many tours. I had a tour in Europe, which I went to London and Hamburg and Copenhagen and Amsterdam, and Norway and Sweden. And then
Paris.
Pardon?
Paris.
Paris.
Yeah. We met in Paris. Yeah.
Sorry. Niels was with me there in Paris.
Yeah. Switzerland.
And, one of the best evenings I had in my life, in fact. And then a big tour in the East Coast, in which I did 10 cities in 11 days. So that's the summary. I was asked also, are we making progress in the movement? And I said, yes, in the sense that we have introduced evidence that is, irrefutable, as was pointed out in the previous lecture. And all this evidence has been summarized in 9/11 Unmasked. And then, of course, the question is, have we made any progress in getting acceptance? And I would say a little bit. And then what do I have hopes for? And I believe the Lawyers Committee may result in uncovering the truth to the public. So that's good. That's mine.
Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. We're going to come back because there's a lot of questions developing for you guys. So let's bring on Stephen Jones, and thank you so much for sharing your heart with us today, David. Stand by. You're all still on camera, and Stephen, just wondering if you could come closer to the camera. Just
Sure.
want to make your head the same size as all the rest of us so we can see your beautiful face.
Well,
thank you. Welcome.
I haven't been called a beautiful face for a while, Richard.
We're getting over it, guys.
David's comment about New Pearl Harbor reminded me of the PNAC document, with which we're all familiar, I'm sure. The 2000 publication by the Project for the New American Century, in which they discussed a transformation in society. They used the term transformation, and they said this transformation cannot occur absent a new Pearl Harbor. A year later, 9/11, 2001 occurred. The new Pearl Harbor, as David pointed out in his excellent book. And I want to point out that we're undergoing this transformation. It is, I consider that the COVID epidemic, some call it a plandemic, but the reaction to it, I think, is more planned. In any case, the reaction has been draconic in some areas, severe. The lockdowns are ill-advised. The mask wearing is not very scientific as far as I can see. I've looked at the data. Masks don't seem to help. Lockdowns don't help. As we look at the data, for instance, from Sweden, which had very good results. I mean, very similar actually to the other European countries as I looked at the data. Another example is Brazil. I'm getting a little off, but I just want to point out this transformation that we consider started with 9/11 is accelerating, if anything, right now with COVID. And I would point to a report by James Corbett. The Corbett report came out yesterday on the connection, the parallels between 9/11 and COVID-19. His report is called COVID 9/11, and that's available on YouTube as well as his Corbett, but if you go to YouTube and just search for a James Corbett report, you'll get that. The other, I'd like to point to an excellent scientific review of the data, so we get the picture of what's really occurring and not the scaremongering that is going on, as went on with 9/11, as you know. But with respect to COVID, the data I wanted to point, if you do a search, this scientist's name is Ivor Cummins, which is a little hard to remember, but if you search for viral issue, as in virus, viral issue, that will pull up his report and his excellent analysis of the data worldwide, really, with respect to what's really going on with COVID, just like we talked what really happened on 9/11. Now, because time is short, and I hit something I really wanted to talk about there, so the transformation continues in society. They're calling it the global reset. Surely you've been aware of what's happening with this. They said we'll never get back to where we were before. Well, that's what they said with 9/11, and this transformation accelerates. At this time, I mean, we can do something about it now if we educate ourselves about what's really happening. And so if you'd look up viral issues and get yourself educated, and the Corbett report. So with limited time, I'm just going to give a homework assignment. I do that when I get to a lecture, and we're out of time, students, so I'm going to give you a homework assignment. And here I would point to some recent work I've done the last about 4 years. The first of these was published in Europhysics News. It's an analysis of the collapse of the World Trade Center towers and World Trade Center 7. And this paper was published, fortunately, by Europhysics News. It's had over 1 million reads or views. As I looked at the data yesterday, they keep track of how many people. It's by far the most widely read paper in this prominent journal in Europe, Europhysics News. And if you just go to Europhysics News, one word, and I don't know. But anyway, if you look at the most widely read papers, they've got a little blank on that, and click on that, it'll pull our paper up. It's been on the top of that list of the most widely read of the papers in that journal. It's been at the top of that list since it was published, as far as I can tell. I check it periodically. It's always been at the top. And it was published in August of 2016. The next publication is April of this year, and that was the request for correction. This is really an Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I just so strongly applaud and congratulate the work that Richard and his team that they are doing. And this request for correction sent to NIST. I know NIST has not responded very favorably. I don't think we really expected that they would. But I was happy to contribute my part to that request for correction, and it's available at the AE 9/11 Truth site, where you can also contribute to Jeff Campbell's campaign. And
now, Stephen, your part is huge in this World Trade Center physics news.
That's another very nice publication. That's excellent. When did that come out, Richard? That was a few years ago too, as I recall. Excellent.
Yeah, you contributed to both of these greatly.
Right.
And I don't remember the date, but Ted Walter again put this.
Ted Walter, just great work. Yeah.
And so I'm gonna let me know, people. Write me. I'll send you 2 of these for the first 2 people who come.
Great.
Info at
Get the physics.
911truth.org. These are our infomercials. We got to get them out there. I want to give this stuff away. Go ahead, Stephen.
You're doing great, Richard.
Thank you.
Doing great. The final publication was, I guess, along the lines of David Ray Griffin. These are my own personal experiences, but also my studies. So there's physics in there as well as personal history. This is a book I published just about a year ago now on Amazon. It's a Kindle publication at present. I hope to get that in paper form, but for the present, it's in Kindle format. And those that have Kindle Unlimited, of course, it's free. And you can find this by going to Amazon and typing Stephen Jones 9-11 research. And that'll bring up this book. It's to buy it, it's $2.99. So it's available. That's about as cheap as I could get it. And I just want to, again, encourage everyone to think about 9/11, but also think about what's happening right now. See if we can make a difference by helping bring forth the facts, the truth of what is really happening, both on 9/11 and with regard to COVID-19, which is really a global transformation, an effort at a global transformation, and not necessarily for the better either. This reset of this lockdowns, the closing of the businesses all over the world, and then the restriction of freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and our just I just feel like our freedoms are being trampled on. The mandates that are coming out that, well, if you look at Melbourne, Australia, it's just crazy what's happening in the state of Victoria in Australia, other places too. New York, I think, is crazy severe with their lockdowns.
Stephen, how did 9/11 change your life, waking up to it, I mean?
Oh, wow. Well, of course, I lost my job, at the university.
Sorry
because
about
I was,
that.
yeah,
God.
I was not planned, of course, but I remember talking to David about this. What do I do, David? They put me on administrative leave because of my reports. And one of them was published in I think a prestigious for the Brigham Young University, which is called the Utah Academy of Arts and Sciences. I published a paper there about thermite and its use on 9/11 in the buildings. That was I gave a presentation along with the paper, and the date on that paper is April of 2006. In September, I was put on administrative leave just before 9/11, 2006. And so, of course, that changed my life dramatically. And I remember asking David, what should I do? There wasn't really much I could do. He suggested accept early retirement if they're offering it, which they did, which kind of surprised me. I didn't know they were going to offer that, but they did. And so I accepted that. And of course, that changed the course of my life dramatically. And I continued to talk about 9/11 and do research. And I'm still, I hope you see, I'm still wanting to participate and help get the truth out.
Yay. Do you have hope for us?
I do.
Oh, yeah.
I do. And we have a large group. Again, the truth involves many aspects, but this transformation of society is not necessarily a good thing that is called for, this new normal, this reset. This new world order is the term we used to use. I think we have to be aware of the ramifications of the truth that we can get out and help it get out, because it works. Truth and freedom go together.
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you, Stephen. I'd like to bring in Niels here, Mr. Niels Harrit, primary author of the Active Thermitic Materials in the World Trade Center Dust. Niels, you're a hero to so many people. You have the floor.
Well, I can surely subscribe to everything what David and Stephen has said so far. Eventually, if you need a common denominator for the change that Stephen is referring to, it is fear.
Right.
and because all power is based on fear, and the powers that be, they love terror, and they love pandemics, because it allows them to, well, transform society in events that Stephen said is not necessarily to the good. But maybe we should roll back, because you have asked us to make an account for how we got into this, and both Stephen and David preceded me, and I guess that the presentation that Stephen was referring to and Brigham Young was the one which was actually made into a DVD, right, Stephen?
Yeah.
So this is the one which was sent to my wife, Pernille Gromme, in the fall of 2006 anonymously. And it was lying around for some time. We didn't know what it was. But the minute I actually put it into the slot of the DVD machine, and I watched on that presentation the collapse of Building 7, it was shocking for two obvious reasons, because as a scientist, I know what gravity is. And to see that building just collapsing, apparently for no reason whatsoever, was a shock. And I had to watch it 10 times before it actually sank in. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, obviously, was, why haven't I heard about anything about this before, like Richard said previously? Because no scientist has ever considered that. And then in the spring of 2007, I actually wrote a paper I wrote an essay for a newspaper here, which by accident actually passed the editor. So it was published and absolutely nothing happened, I guess. And then eventually it was translated into English. It was read by some people. And I believe that it was after the summer of 2007 that I was a referee on a paper that you, Stephen, published together with Kevin in The Environmentalist.
Right. Yes.
Right. And
yes.
I was referee on that paper. And as you know, what is obvious is that the referee is blind to the authors, but the authors, for very straight reasons, are not blind to the referee. And it happens once in a while. So the referee has the option actually to contact the authors directly. Usually the referee writes a report and say either it's acceptable or it's not. But sometimes the referee contact the authors directly if there is something either very interesting, or it's to make the communication shorter. Say, if you change this or that and you resubmit it can pass without any comments from my part. But in this case, I got very interested in the situations, and maybe I should make an account for the people who don't know this paper, because it is about the emissions of gases from ground zero in the 3 months which passed after 9/11 until the fires was officially closed down on December the 20th. And it is stunning what is happening, what is coming out in the atmosphere. And I mentioned that one of the chemicals, and it's like eruptions, like volcanoes or geysers on specific days. And some of the chemicals coming up is maybe quite, I would not say common, and they should certainly not be there in these amounts we are talking about here. Benzene, I give me some chemical names here: benzene, styrene, propylene, eventually toluene, and but there also was a chemical coming out, and forgive me for giving the name of this chemical is 1,3-diphenyl propane, and why that should be there was quietly we don't know yet. It was a big question. So I got into correspondence. I contacted Kevin and Kevin Ryan, and we had a correspondence. I got very interested, and eventually we ended up. We never reached a conclusion actually where this chemical came from, all the evidence was there, and on the conclusions and whatever could be brought as a hypothesis was perfectly okay. So it was printed eventually. But this question remains to this day, and I'm bringing it up. I don't know if this is the proper time to do this, Richard, because it actually connects to the picture you showed about half an hour ago or a little more about the collapse of the Twin Towers. You see the totally canopy of debris being thrown out, and what is the force driving all these steel beams and girders being thrown up and out at the speed you referred to? What is the driving force? And I believe that it is a nanothermite acting here, not exactly as an explosive, more something in between what you call an explosive or a propellant, because these are one of the virtues, one of the options of nanotechnology, that when you're building the materials from the bottom up, instead of top down, when the old-fashioned thermite, you're mixing iron oxide, you're mixing aluminum and iron oxide, rust powders. This is the top down. But in nanotechnology, you're making the materials from the bottom up, which leaves you with the option to tune the materials and take advantage of the enormous amount of energy being in the thermite reaction. Classical explosives are not particularly energetic. Dynamite or molecular explosives. The key is that they're fast, they're extremely fast, and the conventional thermite is very slow. But enter nanotechnology and you can speed up the reaction because the components get much more. And also you have the option to add, and this is where this chemical comes into. It's embedded in a polymer, and it's a polymer which is providing the gas, and the gas is a condition for moving things in a rocket. Okay, so now you have something in between an explosive and a propellant, and that is what is, in my opinion, giving the thrust to all the material being thrown out of the Twin Towers. And this is what you see, it's in your face. And as Richard pointed out previously, all these pieces are drawing after them a completely homogeneous white smoke trail. What is that? That's aluminum oxide. That's what it is. So, if I may round this up, in order to have a coherent picture of the collapse of the Twin Towers, you need 3 times of energetic materials. Ordinary explosives, I'll return to that. We don't know if they are what we call molecular explosives or if they're thermitic. We don't know that. And then thermate, which was evidenced by Jonathan Barnett of the Worcester Institute of Technology, because he found sulfidation of steel, which is an irrefutable proof of the existence of thermate, because thermate is a military version of the thermite reaction where you add sulfur into it. So it makes it what you call a eutectic mixture with the iron and iron oxide actually. So he discovered iron sulfide within the steel beams he got by accident. It was a slip from NIST, both from Building 7 and from the Twin Towers. And third, you need the nanothermite. And the thermate is used for cutting the columns at the base. And the explosions are all over. One point which I have thought of, I introduced this hypothesis 10 years ago in Toronto. And I've thought to this day, how on earth can they trigger the nanothermite? If you apply it on the inside of the outer panels, of the perimeter panels of the Twin Towers, how can they trigger them? Because as Richard pointed out, the destruction zone is moving, it's accelerating almost at gravitational acceleration. And this is because they have to hide whatever is happening inside. So it has to have close to the same speed as the falling debris in order for us not to be able to see what's going on inside. But if you watch carefully, you can see the explosions all over. So what was the last one here? Yeah. So it's in your face. You need three energetic materials to make a coherent model of the collapse of the Twin Towers. And once you see it, it's in your face. There's 1 billion people watching this in real time, and because all the white stuff is aluminum oxide, and I believe that this is what Stephen announced in Boston in, what was it, on December 2007, the key finding there. So you actually have a consistent picture. That's what I suggest. And that is where the chemical from the environmental come in, because the 1,3-diphenyl propane, I believe, is the key to identifying the polymer. We still don't know what the polymer is. That is, we still don't know where the gas comes from. And the gas is a condition for having a thrust to move things. Thermite, the classical thermite, cannot move things. But you see things being moved, so you need a force. So you need a gas production of gas, and that's where the 1,3-diphenyl propane comes in, and we still don't know what it is.
That's amazing. I'd never heard that.
Well,
I don't know what it is. Well, so would you speculate?
No. Yeah, well, of course. Every hypothesis is speculation, but a scientific paper is a set of data and hypotheses. And you can never submit a paper without actually not trying to come with a hypothesis. It's being rejected flatly. The editor says you have to come with a hypothesis. Well, I suggested this in Toronto, and I also presented this a year ago in Zurich. You were there online, Richard, but that's where I wrapped it up actually and tried to get this together. But it fits, everything fits, and that's a good scientific theory when all the pieces, there's nothing missing here. There's no contradiction. If you accept that there are three kinds of energetic material.
Well, Niels, for those who don't know, the EPA found one molecule, and I'm quoting, at levels that dwarfed all others. Now, I don't know what to mean by dwarfed all others, but it's a huge amount. And they said, we've never seen it in any other sampling we've done. And this is World Trade Center dust.
That's the one.
1,3-diphenyl propane.
Yes.
Well, they said, well, maybe it comes from computers, but there's been computers in lots of office fires that they've sampled, and they've never found 1,3-diphenyl propane there. So what the hell is it?
I really looked into different polymers. And eventually polystyrene gives off a little bit of 1,3-diphenyl propane, but we're down to, I believe, 5%. It cannot account. So this, what do you call it? The beakers you use for coffees, and so no, polystyrene cannot account for this.
Okay, Stephen.
There's not enough around, and there's not enough of it in there.
Maybe I can get Stephen to speculate.
Well, what do you think, Steve?
I think we should ask Kevin Ryan what he thinks now, but sounds to me like Niels has pursued this. I remember, of course, this molecule, this strange finding, but we did not have a solution as of our environmentalist paper, which, by the way, was certainly a peer-reviewed, another example of a solid peer-reviewed paper. So no, I don't have a speculation, unless it's in the material that's holding the aluminum. In the red chips, you've got the aluminum, and it could very well be in that red material.
It's a matrix,
as part of the matrix. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. And what's a polymer, guys?
Yeah, we don't know what polymer it is. That's the key.
Well, in general, what is a polymer? I actually
plastic.
Don't. Oh, okay.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
It's some form of plastic.
Yeah,
What's so dangerous about plastic?
Depends what you put in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's so
dangerous
about plastic, Niels?
Pardon?
What is so dangerous about plastic?
But plastic is very useful. Look around.
No, I'm talking about 1,3-diphenyl propane in the World Trade Center dust that shouldn't be there, that the EPA found at levels that dwarfed all others. It's a polymer, you said, right? So
no, 1,3-diphenylpropane is the product of the pyrolysis. Pyrolysis means you destruct something with heat. It's a degradation product of the polymer.
oh, okay.
So I was looking for a polymer which could produce this substance
I see.
when it's being heated and destructed by heat. I didn't find it. I couldn't find it. I was thinking, actually, eventually we had to publish, or I have to write to the editor of the environmentalist and said, please, it's perfectly okay, and go ahead and publish it. We never solved it. Kevin was working heavily on it as well. And it remains a question to this day. You know, Kevin made nanothermite in his backyard, but the polymer he used there was a perfluoroalkane, which is actually a very good idea because you can make a polymer with Teflon. Did you know that, Stephen?
Yeah,
No,
yes.
sorry, you can make a thermite with aluminum and Teflon. It works.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and it produced carbon dioxide. So that's when you see Kevin making the nanothermite in his backyard, he blows off the lid. And that is actually illustration of the effect we're talking about here. In that case, it's carbon dioxide being formed. So that's how you make explosives out of the thermite reaction, is you put it into a polymer which can produce a gas.
Okay,
Right.
well, this whole discussion's my fault.
Yeah.
I egg you on. For Dr. David Ray Griffin, you were one of the first I know, this viewer says, who openly questioned 9/11. What kind of trouble did you have in your life when you spoke out?
At first, I didn't have any trouble with my school. It we happened to have a president and a dean who was very supportive of my work. But they moved on, and there was a new president who came, and so things didn't go so well from then on. Nobody gave me any trouble, except that when there was a big conference about my work, and they wouldn't publicize it. So I haven't really had what you would call trouble, good trouble or bad trouble.
I'm glad to hear that. And have any? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Have any of you ever been threatened in any way? And I'll answer for myself, no. And I find it actually a little disappointing. Disappointing. I haven't even been offered any money to be quiet. I would take that as a compliment. Maybe we're getting somewhere, Stephen.
Well, I was threatened,
Oh,
and I don't talk about it too much. I may have alluded to it in this Amazon book I mentioned about 9/11, but there was a certain fellow, I can mention his name. It's C. Martin something. I won't mention his, well, okay, why not? Hinckley. I mean, he might sue me, but it's I've got his emails. He sent them to the administration. What really got him going, and he threatened my career. He
wow.
said, I can remember the wording. I think he said, what's at stake here is more important than any one man's career. And he was referring to my career. And later, after I was dismissed from BYU, he said I had to do that. He had contacts with people in the government, and he said I had to do that for the sake of the Bush administration, Bush-Cheney administration. That's basically what he said after I had been dismissed. So he took credit for, and he had written to the administration, and specifically he opposed by talking about thermite. And in fact, it was that talk that I mentioned that was published in Utah Academy of Arts and Sciences, the April 2006 paper. And that got into the Deseret News newspaper in Utah. He read it and he was just livid and wrote to the administration and said, I should not talk about thermite. His excuse was people might read that. I mean, terrorists could start using thermite. And my response to him is, thermite has been around since it was about 100 years.
1893.
Thank you, Niels. I quoted the date for him at the time. I said, it's no secret. You can buy it on eBay. It's not a secret. Now, nanothermite, that's a different issue. You cannot buy that on eBay. That's a very high tech.
Who makes that stuff, Stephen?
Los Alamos National Lab did make it, and they advertised it as something that could be used in demolitions. That was in one of my talks, or at least one of my talks. So yeah, it's a very high tech material. I mean, who made this quantity? We don't know. That's part of what should be investigated.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's very high tech material.
Next question is for David Ray Griffin. But before, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, about harassment. My institute leader at the Institute of Chemistry at the University of Copenhagen, I had problems. I mean, he was not very happy about the things I was saying, either at the institute or in the public domain. So he actually told me, he forbid me to talk in the public domain. And so then we had to sit down and say, and it turned out there were rules for that. Actually, and those are the academics was committed to give their affiliation whenever they gave a talk in the public domain, according to the rules. So he had a problem. So say, well, can't you just don't say you come from the Chemical Institute? And I said, okay. So if you see one of my early presentations says University of Copenhagen, nothing about the Institute of Chemistry. So I said, so he got off, But then I retired in 2010, and it was a little, but formally I left by myself. I left my position.
Yeah. I might say they asked me to put on my papers, which I did. This is the sole responsibility of the author, and also I was asked not to talk about Dick Cheney, which at the time, he was the vice. And
I remember.
You remember?
Yeah.
And that's in my book too, about Dick Cheney. He contacted the university, his office did, because he spoke at the university 3 months after I was early retired, January of 2007. He spoke in April, and he was given an honorary doctoral degree for public service. Dick Cheney, if you can imagine, by my university. I was in tears. I mean, it was just absolutely crazy.
Isn't there also a Dick Cheney building at BYU?
No, I don't. Well, I don't think so.
Okay.
But the university did allow protests on campus, 2 protests, and I participated in both of those.
Oh.
But they let our paper pass.
They let our paper pass. That was the good thing.
Yeah.
That's right. And later they made me an emeritus professor. So, there's some good things.
It's a mixed bag. How about you, David? Have you been threatened or coerced or anything like that?
No, I have not. I did want to mention, though, that about Dick Cheney, my book, Bush and Cheney, makes clear that the first term of the Bush-Cheney administration was run by Cheney. Bush was in the basement doing exercises. And so when people talk about Bush as being responsible for 9/11, it was Cheney.
Right.
Okay, well, there's no...
I wanted to apologize.
Your feelings about that. Go ahead.
I want to apologize that while Niels was talking, my computer, or my wife's computer, ran out of juice.
Oh, is that what happened?
To come and give me some more electricity. So I'm very sorry for my disturbance.
No, it
That's
worked
okay.
out. I saved this question for you. Now, we're going over, as people can tell, and I'm perfectly fine with that. This is the most stimulating conversation I've had in 10 years. So one of the other books that David Ray Griffin has written is none other than the excellent Mysterious Collapse of World Trade Center Building 7. And I have gotten so much out of this book. It goes into the lies of the NIST report. It exposes the classic features of controlled demolition, which Building 7 exhibits. And it's from a theologian. It's better than anything I've ever done. David, tell us the story about this book.
Am I still on?
You're still on.
Yes.
Tell us the story about this book. Quickly, this story about this book. Can you hear me? Oh, he's coming and going. He's frozen. Anyway,
It's frozen, yeah.
before he comes back, I want to give you guys 2 copies of this book to 2 of you. It's always the same numbers, 2 and 2. Just email me at info@ae911truth.org. And David, you're back. Tell us the story about this book.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, because when I was giving the list of my favorite books, I forgot to mention that World Trade Center 7, which is the best 9/11 book I wrote. So thank you for lifting it up.
Do this. Yeah. Tell us a quick story about why you decided to write about Building 7.
Well, I had learned from Stephen and Niels and others on that team about it, and David Chandler's great work, and it was just what one would call a slam dunk that the official story is false all the way through. So it's not my most popular book. It's bigger than the others, and it's maybe a little difficult reading, but it is my most important book, I think, about 9/11.
Well, it made AE 9/11 Truth into something that the 9/11 Truth movement can be proud of. I mentioned earlier, we seem to be the tip of the spear of the 9/11 Truth movement and aimed squarely at the Achilles heel of the perpetrators and in their many forms, NIST being chief among them, the media cover-up artists also, and of course government, who's doing nothing to expose the truth about 9/11. Now my question, not mine, but one of our viewers for you, David, how hard was it to find a publisher that was willing to cover a topic like 9/11 Truth? Yeah, that one.
Well, as I tried to say in my introduction, it was very difficult. There was, common courage, which simply said, not for us. Most of the publishers did not even respond to my letter, even those where Richard Falk had recommended my book. And so it was only because I think, as far as I know, I wouldn't have ever had 9/11, and the New Pearl Harbor published if had not been for Pam Thompson at Interlink Books, whose father had read my other books, my theological books, and so she decided, well, although he's a 9/11, he's a conspiracy theorist, maybe he's okay.
All right. For Niels and Stephen, do you think there's any follow-up work that you could pursue regarding the active thermitic materials paper, or somebody else should pursue?
I'm out of the loop, but I certainly have at least 2 very good experiments, which I never got around to doing.
Yeah.
You want to hear?
Yeah.
Well, one
Yes.
thing is, talking about the 1,3-diphenyl propane, one thing you could do, Stephen, is simply to put it into a mass spectrometer.
Yeah.
You'll get
Right.
the answer immediately.
In other words, save the combustion products and analyze for.
Well, in the mass spectrometer, you don't save anything. You have the inlet, and you just heat it up, and it goes bang.
I see. Yeah,
And
that's right.
and you'll get a molecular weight with 10
Yeah.
10
Okay, that's
significant numbers. So you have,
That's
if
right.
there's molecular ion, you have it immediately. Otherwise, you have a breakdown pattern from it. So you'll get identification immediately. But I don't have access more, and I only have one chip left, and I keep that as a relic. One good chip left. And the other thing is a nanotube story, which I'm personally very sad that I never got around to doing, because maybe some of you know that story, but there was a report from Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, where a group of pathologists had investigated lung tissue from the first responders, and they had seven persons involved, and the 4 of them, they found in the lung tissue nanotubes, carbon nanotubes, which is a material is made of carbon atoms, and they are about 1 nanometer in diameter. They're extremely thin and extremely strong, 200 times stronger than spider web. And they found these nanotubes in the lung tissue of the first responders. Their control group was building construction workers, and because they have a whole tissue bank, which means they have a control group, huge control group of construction workers, so they could go into them and say, in none of them they found carbon nanotubes. And it came to me in 2010, actually. Yeah, in 10, we were in New York City, and I was together with a guy called Eric Cartolucci, who was a chemist, and we were giving a presentation. You were there, Richard, as well. And that's where the 3 beams came up that evening. Okay, there was a chemist called Eric Cartolucci, and I was just talking with him like a colleague. Now, what are you doing, young man? Yeah, he was working on his PhD on carbon nanotubes, and then it just snapped to me, because nanotubes, they have got the Nobel Prize later on, but at that time it was a very hot material, and in order to make carbon nanotubes, 3 conditions must be fulfilled. You must have a source of carbon atoms, which we have in the polymer in the red gray chips. You need high temperature, which we have in abundance, and you need a catalyst, and iron and nickel are about the best for them. So say, hey, carbon nanotubes, because at that time I had read the report from the Mount Sinai Hospital. Okay, so I don't remember if it was before or after that Kevin had made his experiments in his back garden, where he had made nanothermite from a recipe from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory I told you about previously, and he had used fluoroalkanes as a polymer. I said, send me some ashes. And he sent me a letter. I have it, it's back of me here. He sent me a letter with the ashes from the combustion of the nanothermite in his garden. The day before I went to Toronto, and I'm showing the pictures. I showed these pictures in Toronto. The day before I went to Toronto, I took the ashes from the nanothermite combustion, and we extracted it with ethanol or propanol. I don't remember. You make an extraction, you dry it. We went to electron microscope, bang, carbon nanotubes there.
Very interesting.
So that makes the link between actually the first responders and the death of them and the nanothermite.
Huh.
And unfortunately, and I'm telling you about one of the regrets in my life. The problem is here that the reaction in itself is brand new, Stephen, because the way you make carbon nanotubes is you per pyrolysis from the gas phase directly on the hot catalyst. It has never been made in a solid state reaction before. So I thought this was made into nature nano letters. And for that reason, I never got that paper written. Very sadly. And I regret that, and I hope maybe what I'm saying here will make somebody else picking up this torch. But I think this will really, it could bring this is the first responders, and this very rare, I don't know what you call it in English, this very kind of lung tissue cancer they're suffering. Carbon nanotubes are really damaging to the health. It's really an issue environment because it's very difficult to get rid of. And they are so small, in my hypothesis, they interfere with the cell membranes. That's why it's a health issue. And the fact that it was found in more than half of the lung tissue from the first responders. This is from April, it was right before, it's from April 2010, I think, that report from Mount Sinai Hospital. It was right before, remember we was at that meeting in New York, Richard, where the free steel beams came up. That's right before that.
Yeah.
That's the two regrets I have. Or the two experiments which remains to be done.
Niels, you're still a relatively young man compared with me. I think you're the one to do it.
I'm 75.
No,
I don't have access. Yeah.
I'm younger than that, but
yeah.
I don't
actually,
have,
Richard,
calling you, Stephen.
a little
I don't
bit.
have access. I don't have access. I mean,
That's the
I'm
thing. That's the
persona
thing.
non grata at the university.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
access-
lost my after the
Yeah.
publication of the 2009 paper, which Niels was the first author. I lost my lab privileges where I was doing electron microscopy work and EDX, down there. And as an underground laboratory, I lost my lab privileges. So, but let me say, Richard, about that, you've presented, we have overwhelming evidence between David's books and the papers that Niels and I and Kevin and others have written and your talks. I mean, we have the latest by Halsey and, the gentleman at Alaska, University of Alaska. We have overwhelming evidence. Ted Walter has done a great job. So I'm right now, as I mentioned, I'm concerned about this. We're embedded in another transformative event, a big lie, and I'd like to see it exposed, and I'd like to see the truth bringing forth freedom, getting us back our freedom of assembly, for instance, freedom of speech, and so on. I'm concerned that this transformation will not be to our liking. A mandatory vaccination would be devastating, I think, for example, just one example.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen.
So I really think that we can do something, taking what we've learned from 9/11 and applying it in our current situation.
Yeah, it sounds like another catalyzing and catastrophic event.
Right.
Pearl Harbor,
Yes.
maybe.
Richard,
David, let's talk. Go ahead, David, and I have another question for you.
if there is time, I'd like to build on what Neil was
You
saying
go right ahead.
about the first responders.
Yeah.
I recently wrote an article about it that was published in a new magazine called Griffin, and a great new magazine, by the way. And I argued in there that the cancer, particularly from the first responders, by itself proves that the buildings were brought down with explosives.
Interesting.
So really, that's all you need.
Tell people where they can find that.
I don't know. It's just called Garrison, with a low G, without a capital G.
Garrison.com.
I think it's just called Garrison.
Okay.
It's something that you get through the mail. It's not online.
Okay.
Well, would you send me a copy? Would you be willing?
I
I'll put it out.
I would.
What? Yeah, I'll put it out everywhere. I mean, that's huge. Cancer. The proof is of the demolition of the towers is the cancer in these and those who didn't survive and those who are still surviving from the first responders. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I can send the article to you.
Yeah.
So and then you can send it to anybody else who's interested.
I'll email you my mailing address.
Good.
Okay. Now let's talk about Chomsky. What hope do we have of reaching him, and what's his problem? That's for you, David. Did you hear that?
Again?
Yeah. Noam Chomsky. What hope do we have of reaching him, and what is his problem?
Oh, it's a very long story. Peter Dale.
Uh-oh. We froze
Lost
David.
it. Yeah.
While he's coming back, let me say that I went into Noam Chomsky's office with one of our volunteers. And hold on a second, David. I'm just prefacing your comments about Chomsky. We went into his office, and he said, "We need peer-reviewed papers from you guys." You know, we'd been peppering him for years. Here we had a binder with 75 peer-reviewed papers. We just dumped it on him. We took a picture. It's available somewhere on our old website. David, go ahead. What's the long story in the short version of Chomsky?
Well, Peter Dale Scott said that he had been good friends with Chomsky, but then they broke over the Kennedy assassination. That Chomsky argued that the idea that was an inside job is just not possible. And so he says the same thing about 9/11. And so I've written to him many times about it, and other people have, and nothing's going to happen. You might as well just give up on Chomsky.
He's getting old too.
Yeah, him too. Huh?
He's even older than I am. But
guys, who's out there that we can break through to that's almost half cracked or worth approaching?
Well, he and Richard Falk are good friends, and Chomsky, in fact, came and stayed with Richard for a few days last year. But Richard is not going to get into trying to convince him about 9/11. You know, they worked together on Vietnam, and so he's done so many great things that I don't like to criticize him too heavily.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, for Niels and Stephen, does it ever frustrate you how huge the findings of your nanothermite paper are, and how academia tries to ignore it?
Steve?
Well, yeah, it is frustrating, Richard. And, we face this problem when we're presenting these data, because I guess it's because as I talk to people, they say, well, the political implications, that is the societal implications, are so great. Plus, how is it possible that so many people can be deceived by, we all know the narrative. Everybody knows the narrative. It was 19 Muslim hijackers. That's it. There was no foreknowledge on the behalf of the government. Everybody knows the narrative. You're challenging the narrative. And so somehow, actually, I think that the COVID, this pandemic has become such almost an obvious distortion of the truth. I think a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, it's you look at the projections of deaths, you look at the actual deaths, they do not correspond. And why do we have lockdowns and masks? And people are actually protesting, I notice, in Germany and
France, Britain,
France,
all
and
over
elsewhere.
Europe.
Yeah. And
Well,
so
go ahead.
You know,
Well,
the point is the people say, wait a minute, the government lies to us, and they impose all these restrictions on our liberties. Maybe we should rethink about 9/11 as well. You see, there's an opening there. It works both ways. If you awaken to the big lie today, then you say, well, wait a minute, where did this transformation effort begin, which was really the new Pearl Harbor of 9/11. And it's
right.
just a continuation and acceleration of that
Yeah.
transformation they're trying to pull on us.
I agree.
Okay. Speaking about the psychology of this whole thing, this viewer says, do you think the inability of for people to psychologically process the official explanation of 9/11, that is not true, it plays a role in some people not being responsive to our point of view? I mean, what are the
Sure.
blocks out there that we have to break open, and how do we break them open, Niels?
Well, maybe David also would comment on that, because I think that is due to the tribe, which is the most important unit in society. It overrules the family, actually, and the tribe is, I believe, is actually in genetics, because if Homo sapiens was not ready to submit to the tribe, he wouldn't survive. So was it the old days, simply. So you're used. It is in Homo sapiens, our nature, to have a leader and to trust him and to give him or her responsibility for us. And if the leader fails, or is obviously a tyrant of to be responsive, or even parents, it hurts. It simply hurts you. It's painful to realize that the person that we have given responsibility for our security fails us, betrays us. It hurts. So it's very simple. You move back from that thought because it hurts, and you goes along with the other sheep in the tribe.
Yeah.
That's one reason. There are several other things which because as Stephen and I, to a lesser extent, have experienced is social exclusion, which is faint compared to what happened back in the Middle Ages, where the conspiracy theories of the day, called heretics, were simply put on the fire and burned. 50,000. Right. It almost happened to Galileo. He just escaped by torture, saying the Earth is standing still in the middle of the universe. So he escaped the fire, the bonfire.
Yeah.
Pardon? We are heretics. We are heretics
that is
of
true.
our time. We are telling the truth, and we are thinking the thoughts, the forbidden thoughts.
That's right.
In 1619, the Catholic Church forbid people to think that the Earth was moving around the sun, and that was the basic for pulling Galileo for the Inquisition in 1633.
David, what are we facing here psychologically?
I'm not a physical scientist. I'm also not a psychological scientist, so I wouldn't try to speak to this.
You're a theologian.
But you did write a book on nationalistic faith. Can you address that part of it?
Well, that's true. I wrote a book on 9/11 and a theological book using 9/11, and that ended up the president and the vice president of the publishing house that accepted my manuscript got fired.
Wow.
And so the press disowned my book. So now I have one fewer publisher now to deal with.
But we're challenging people's faith in Americanism. You
That's
touched
what I
on
wanted.
that quite a bit. Tell us about that.
Well, that was the issue. The head of this organization that fired those people, fired those guys, and denounced my book, said that it was a Presbyterian organization, and they're usually pretty big. You might remember on about Calvin. Well, I've written a lot of books about Calvin and denounced him up and down, and I've never had any criticism by them about my criticism of Calvin. But theology is one thing, Americanism is another thing, and they could not accept that my criticism of America as perfect. So that's the situation there.
So it's embedded in all of us, this pristine faith we have that America, right or wrong, and always right, just kind of can't be questioned.
That's right. So, well, and, when I first started on 9/11, I took time off from a book I was writing on the American Empire. And I thought, well, I'm just going to write up this little lecture that I had given to my students. I'll write this up as a little book, and then I'll be able to get back to my book on the empire. And of course, 12 books later, many years later, just this year, I finally got out that book on the American Empire. It's called the American Trajectory. And that's the issue is about American exceptionalism.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Steve, we are exceptional, but not in necessarily a good way.
Okay.
Well, both.
What are we facing here psychologically, Stephen?
Oh, wow.
And this will be our last response. We're going to have to move on to our surprise guest coming up here. So go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, again, I have to draw this parallel with COVID because we're all embedded in that, I think. And we are. And we see, I mean, if you tried to write down what is the narrative, it seems to be morphing a bit, but basically the narrative has been that, and it's the same thing we face with 9/11. There's this great danger, as Niels pointed out. We have to fear this terrible threat. It was Muslim hijackers, and they're in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have to go to war and so on. Now the threat is this invisible virus, but it's going to overwhelm our hospitals. There is no cure. They're adamant about that. You have to take this vaccine. We've heard this pronouncement. And you have to stay locked down in your house, isolate yourself socially. It's unprecedented, this fear. Fear is not unprecedented as a means of controlling populations and exerting a transformation. But the opportunity to wake up and people saying, wait a minute, it's not closing down the hospitals. It's not killing people by the millions. What are we doing? Why are we locking down? Why are we isolating ourselves from each other? I think people are starting to wake up, and that's a psychological thing. And I just think it's great that there is this opportunity to be involved in helping people wake up.
Okay, Niels, you have the last word here tonight.
Oh, I'm just saying, absolutely in what Stephen said. Please notice the link between 9/11 and the COVID-19. But now we have become the terrorists. It's we who are contagious.
Right.
So it's actually, but I'm not ill. Yes, you are, because you have taken this RT-PCR test and it's positive, but I'm not sick. Yes, you are. You are the terrorists. So go in quarantine. That is deep.
That is. Yeah.
So and
it's warfare.
And And that's the extinction of the terror. The war on terror has morphed into the war, well, on us.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
we are the terrorists now.
That's right.
Now that is deep, but
And our
still,
freedom.
still not. Yeah, and yeah. And
Yeah, it's
still,
always freedom.
9/11 is key. And maybe I should leave the last word either to you, Richard, or to David, because 9/11 is key still, because that's where we have been. World War III started 19 years ago. And the children coming out of schools have never, at least in Denmark, it's different in America, but in Denmark, the kids coming out of the school now has never experienced our country in peace. And it makes me angry and sad. So World War III started 19 years ago, and 9/11 was the start of it all. And COVID-19 is complete, as Stephen has pointed out so brilliantly, extinction of 9/11.
Yeah, so
it has morphed. 9/11 has morphed into COVID-19.
Right.
And it's just as a false flag as anyone can be. Yeah.
Let's agree then that freedom is what's under attack in every case. So getting the word out about 9/11 will wake up those who are questioning the current situation. So we'll work harder and harder, and you guys set the stage for us. Again, we can't tell you how grateful we are from the bottom of our hearts and the entire 9/11 Truth Movement. Niels Harrit, David Ray Griffin, Stephen Jones, we love you, and we hope you continue working in your retirement for 9/11 Truth, and certainly, at least in your prayers. Our hearts go with you, and we hope to meet again, and that this is not the last time we talk with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. It's good
Thank
to see
you,
you all.
guys.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.